The other bidder, Sir Richard Branson's People's Lottery, was too risky. Sir Richard said he was sad and baffled and is still considering whether to challenge the decision in the courts.
Well, not to be.
For the second time, Sir Richard Branson, clearly stunned, saw his long-cherished hopes of running a not-for-profit lottery dashed. It was a different story at rival Camelot. The present lottery operators learnt to take nothing for granted. Even at the moment of victory, the boss's fingers were still crossed. Written off in August, Camelot staged a remarkable comeback. After 7 years, it says it still has a lot to offer.
We've got lots of new exciting games, new technology, mobile phones, interactive television, internet and so on. And I think it's probably the combination of the exciting things going forward with the proven track record.
Camelot's bid, like that from Branson's People's Lottery, was delivered in February. Since then, the process of selecting the next operator has come close to farce. The bidders had 3 months to compile applications running to thousands of pages. It's taken 9 months to assess them. In August, the National Lottery Commission chairman, Dame Helena Shovelton, announced neither had won, but negotiations would continue with the People's Lottery. Camelot's boss went to court and successfully challenged that decision. It was, said the judge, conspicuously unfair. Dame Helena resigned to be replaced by Lord Burns. He promised to re-examine both bids without preconceptions. Today, the Commission delivered its verdict. It still thinks the Branson bid could raise more for good causes, but the Commission thinks it's just too risky.
We came to the view that the risks associated with the TPL bid were greater than they were with Camelot on a range of issues, to do with sales, to do with the game plans, to do with financial soundness, and to do with costs.
But one commissioner, Hilary Bloom, quit, saying the Branson bid's technology, game plan and marketing flair were better. The change of operator is a huge risk, but a risk worth taking, she said. Sir Richard says he's baffled and disappointed by the decision.
The commissioners, on oath, only 2 or 3 months ago in court said that the People's Lottery would give hundreds of millions of pounds more to good causes than Camelot. And so it is fairly unbelievable how they kind of changed their mind.
At their London office, Camelot staff celebrated. Across the road at the Department of Culture, the government knew it hadn't fulfilled its election pledge of a not-for-profit lottery.
We said that we would seek a not-for-profit operator, provided, of course, that they met the tests of propriety and matching the best for the good causes. That's the decision that the Lottery Commission have now made. It's been up to them to make that decision.
So the Lottery Commission opted for the devil it knew rather than all the uncertainties associated with a new operator. But this extraordinary saga may not be over yet. Sir Richard says he'll decide tomorrow whether to mount his own legal challenge to this latest decision. Nick Hyam, BBC News.
Sir Richard Branson and the team from the People's Lottery believed that they had the National Lottery within their grasp. But in the space of a few months, they went from being the only contender left to losing out to their bitter rivals at Camelot. Our business correspondent Rory Kethlin-Jones looks at why the Branson bid failed.
For every pound spent on a ticket, more for good causes. That was Sir Richard Branson's promise, and in August it seemed to have convinced the Lottery Commission. Then Lord Burns, the economist who'd ended up running the Treasury, was brought in to chair the commission. He decided the figures were shaky. The People's Lottery says he never heard the case presented to the other commissioners.
We took them through in exhaustive detail, all of which unfortunately Lord Burns missed, but that seems not to have obstructed his view that he knows best.
The Branson team say their figures were clearly superior. They forecast annual sales of £7.4 billion, marginally ahead of Camelot, though the Commission said both were optimistic. Their costs at just over £200 million were almost £100 million less than Camelot's, and the People's Lottery was taking no profit, while Camelot would get about £36 million. That all added up to £160 million more for good causes. But today the Commission was worried that the People's Lottery could have underestimated the cost of marketing. There was concern too over plans to make winning more difficult. The idea was that more rollover weeks would boost interest and sales, but one expert said Sir Richard Branson had got it wrong.
Clearly hadn't done his research well enough, I don't think. He was extrapolating from evidence in the United States, which doesn't really seem to be applicable.
Throughout this contest, the bottom line was who would help good causes most. Even the charities said victory should go to the most effective operator, regardless of whether they were taking a profit. In August, the commissioners felt that the People's Lottery would probably raise more for good causes. Today, they felt there was a big risk that that wouldn't happen. The bid hadn't changed, the head of the commission had, and it seems the cautious Lord Burns made all the difference. Rory Catlin-Jones, BBC News.
Well, our political editor, Andrew Marr, is in Westminster now. Andrew, this whole process has been rather a shambles, hasn't it?
It certainly has. We've had a slightly strange atmosphere from the government today when they've almost been disclaiming any responsibility for this. They've been saying, well, we've got this body, this chap, Lord Burns, he's in charge of some committee, and he's decided that the chap with the beard won't get it and the woman without the beard will get it, and it's really nothing to do with us. And that clearly will not wash. Terry Burns is the man from Whitehall. We all know the phrase about the man from Whitehall knows best. He always has been. But the government have controlled this process all the way through. And frankly, most of the way through, it's been something of a shambles. And for the government to stand aside from this at this stage and say it's nothing to do with us, it's all the committee, is something that I think clearly Richard Branson doesn't accept, and many other people looking at this won't accept either.
I suppose the two people who have come out worse from this are Sir Richard Branson, obviously, and the Culture Secretary, Chris Smith.
Well, Chris Smith has had a pretty awful year. He's admired by lots of colleagues. He's a clever, assiduous and likeable minister. But, you know, he's been in charge of the Royal Opera House, he's been in charge of the Dome, he's been in charge of the Wembley problems, he's been in charge of this. It's been a rotten year for the Culture Secretary, and the Conservatives are certainly making a lot of that tonight, understandably so. Richard Branson's perhaps in an even worse position. He's still waiting to hear whether he's going to win the bid for the East Coast Main Line and his railway businesses. And this is an empire based very much on the credibility and standing of one man who tonight the government have certainly removed a certain degree of credibility from. They were going to put their stamp of approval on him, he thought only weeks ago. Now they've removed it again. He's no doubt very, very angry, and I think a lot of people at Westminster tonight expect him to take this to the House of Lords if he has to.
Andrew Marr, thanks very much. MPs have voted overwhelmingly to allow the use of human embryos for research into new medical treatments. Scientists hope that one day they'll be able to grow new human tissues in the lab to treat many incurable diseases. But opponents fear that the research will open the door to cloning humans.
This is what tonight's vote was about. Each of these tubes contain frozen human embryos produced as part of fertility treatment. To some, they are the first stage of human life, which we interfere with at our peril. To others, they are small clusters of cells that could offer hope to thousands living with devastating diseases.
The ayes to the right, 366. The noes to the left, 174.
And tonight, the Commons voted with confidence to use embryos to research new treatments. MPs divided not on party lines, but on the lines of their conscience. For the government, it was about finding cures for the incurable.
If embryo research on infertility is acceptable, surely research for Parkinson's should be too. If embryo research for contraception is acceptable, surely research for muscular dystrophy should be too.
But others called for caution, because we can do something does not make it the right thing to do.
I think there is too little analysis of some of the ethical consequences, but most of all, that before we're willing to use embryonic cells, we have to be convinced there is no alternative.
As a first step, the scientists want to use the embryos to see if they can take out special stem cells that can grow into replacement tissue and even organs. But that is just the start. Eventually, the hope is it'll lead to therapeutic cloning. This involves taking a cell from a patient together with an unfertilized human egg which has had its nucleus removed. The two are then fused together to form a cloned embryo. After a few days, the special stem cells can be removed and grown. The hope is they can be turned into skin, bone, and even one day complete organs, all of them exact matches of the patient who donated the original cell. The critics claim stem cell research can be done without using embryos, and so is unnecessary as well as being wrong. They also fear cloning cells today will lead to cloning people tomorrow.
This is
bad news because it means we can now create cloned human beings. We can create them deliberately with the single intention of killing them to gather scientific information.
Many families affected by these diseases will be offering a prayer to Parliament tonight. But even among those who support more research, there is still a feeling of unease. For while we may know the direction in which we're heading, we may not know our final destination. Neil Dixon, BBC News, Westminster.
The body which oversees boxing in Britain is facing a huge bill for compensation after an appeal court ruling that it's liable for injuries suffered by the fighter Michael Watson in 1991. Watson, who's now 35, is seeking damages of about £1 million from the British Boxing Board of Control. The ruling is likely to have implications for other sporting bodies.
The winning smile was there, and he may just have dealt the British Boxing Board of Control a legal knockout blow. But as he was wheeled away from the High Court in London today, Michael Watson knew his fight for compensation for his injuries is likely to go on, with the board unable to pay the £1 million he's demanding. That's just not acceptable to his legal team.
There's plenty of money in British boxing, and if British boxing gets together as a whole, it can ensure that Michael receives his money. If it's possible to raise vast sums of money to encourage Michael Tyson to come over to Britain to fight, it should be possible to arrange for Michael to receive his compensation.
Over in the board's corner, a further appeal to the House of Lords is being considered, and hopes are still entertained that bankruptcy can be avoided.
I hope that won't occur. I hope that won't occur. It is now for the administrators and the board to put a proposal to its creditors, of which Michael Watson is one, and let's hope that the proposal will be acceptable.
That would appear unlikely, since the fateful night when he collapsed at the end of his world title fight against Chris Eubank, Michael Watson has shown a true fighter's tenacity to obtain maximum damages because of the board's failure to have adequate resuscitation equipment available at ringside. Today, the rules state it must be provided at all fights. The fact that it is will have enhanced Paul Ingle's chances of recovery. He's still seriously ill in hospital after suffering similar injuries last Saturday. This judgment changes the playing field for just about every sport. It means that governing bodies are responsible for the welfare of all participants and must ensure that adequate medical facilities are on hand to deal with serious injuries. The cost of providing that, from park pitches to grand stadia, will be huge.
It would take more than a Watson type of judgment to take down the Football Association or the Rugby Football Union. But smaller governing bodies engaged in contact sports may find that their insurance premiums go up, and they may find they have to levy more money from their participants.
But both boxing and Michael Watson have already had to pay an unacceptable price. Whatever the courts might have ruled, today there were no winners, only losers. Kevin Geary, BBC News.
The financial regulator, the Financial Services Authority, is to investigate the Equitable Life Pensions crisis. The Treasury says the FSA will examine the events that resulted in the insurance company closing its doors to new business. But MPs want to know if the Treasury itself did enough to warn policyholders about the Equitable's difficulties when it was in charge of regulating insurers. Tony Blair has paid a farewell visit to the Millennium Dome to thank staff for their hard work. In only his second trip to the beleaguered attraction, Mr. Blair hailed the economic impact of the project on the area, predicting the Dome would repay the original investment many times over. 2 men and a woman have been arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of a police officer killed by a hit-and-run driver. Constable John O'Dell, who was 30, was carrying out speed checks with a radar gun near Margate in Kent when he was struck by a car. It happened on the day ministers published a consultation paper proposing tougher penalties for dangerous driving.
This car was found abandoned in an alleyway half a mile from where the constable was hit. Its severe damage witnessed to a high-speed collision. Colleagues who were with the officer say it carried him 50 yards along the road. PC O'Dell had been on an operation to crack down on drink drivers and speeding motorists. He'd been using a radar gun here and had apparently been trying to flag down a speeding car, but it ploughed straight into him. He died in hospital of massive injuries. Tributes were paid by local people and colleagues.
We had a number of members of the public coming up to us in absolute tears, and we can only say, from the point of view of Thanet Police and Kent Constabulary, that we are so grateful for the support and understanding they're showing towards us.
News of the death came as the government published proposals for tougher action against dangerous motorists, particularly those who kill or drive at excessive speeds. Lisa Gale's mother was killed by a hit-and-run driver on a zebra crossing. He was fined £500 and given 6 penalty points.
She'd suffered horrific injuries. Our children have suffered the trauma of losing their grandmother, and he just walked away with a £500 fine. Didn't seem right, didn't add up.
The proposals, which apply to Scotland, England and Wales, include more use of disqualifications, the temporary clamping of vehicles to enforce bans, and harsher sanctions for the worst speeders, including bigger fines and more penalty points for exceeding the limit by a wide margin. Road safety groups have welcomed the plans, but say the courts are failing to use the sanctions they've already got.
If we take 1998, where there were already maximum jail sentences of 10 years for causing death by driving, only 30 people that year got more than 5 years imprisonment, and 52 of the remainder got less than 1 year. Now that seems to me to suggest that the courts are not using the powers that are already at their disposal.
Heavily drunk drivers could be jailed under the plans, and repeat offenders will have to take a new driving test. Ministers want to change attitudes. For example, they want speeding to be considered as antisocial as drink driving now is. But they say the ordinary motorist has nothing to fear. It's the hardcore they want to penalise. Jane Peel, BBC News.
The American president-elect George W. Bush has met President Clinton at the White House to begin the handover of power. Mr. Clinton's advice to his successor on how to cope with the most powerful job in the world was apparently restricted to suggesting he put together a good team and do what you think is right. Later, Mr. Bush met his election opponent, Vice President Al Gore.
They looked like old friends. Bill Clinton, the jovial host, George Bush, the polite guest. But these two have a history. During the campaign, Bush said his first job as president would be to give the Oval Office a darn good scrubbing after the Clinton scandals. Now, though, post-election protocol requires political graciousness.
I am humbled and honored, and I can't thank the president enough for his hospitality. He didn't need to do this, and the president is kind enough to offer some advice. If he is, I will take it in.
My only advice to anybody in this is just to get a good team and do what you think is right.
Not a creature was.
The Clintons enjoying their last White House Christmas. Hillary Clinton got an early present in the form of a £5 million advance for her memoirs. Her husband apparently delighted.
Surely you don't want her writing about Paula Jones, Monica Lewinsky, and all those things again. Is she likely to do that?
You ought to ask her. She can write about whatever she wants. I tell you, I bet it'll be a good book.
The trappings of power, though, already being transferred to George W. Bush. He paid a courtesy call on the loser of America's contested election. How are you? A symbolic reconciliation amid the chill, and an important moment for the president-elect, who's vowed to unite the country and reach out to Democrats still angry about the election outcome. George Bush now heads back to Texas. More senior cabinet appointments are expected tomorrow. In just 1 month, he'll be sworn in as America's 43rd president. And then this outbreak of political civility may come to an abrupt end. As he prepared to fly off, the snow got much worse. A reminder to George Bush that when he returns to Washington, he'll need to tread very carefully. Stephen Sacker, BBC News, Washington.
During their meeting, President Clinton said he was leaving an economy that was not heading towards recession. But he did say it may grow at only half the rate of recent years. Later, the Federal Reserve warned there was a risk of a sharp downturn. Our Los Angeles correspondent David Willis reports on America's changing economic mood.
This is a Class A motorhome.
If you want to know the fate of the American economy, the experts say, then pay a visit to this Los Angeles showroom. America's love affair with the open road has made the Winnebago mobile home an unusual yet trusted barometer of economic prosperity.
Oh, nice.
All the indications are there's a bumpy road ahead.
Younger families that are raising their kids might postpone it a little bit. It depends on their job situations, depends on what happens, while their financial outlook is.
We put it off until the economy gets better.
Possibly, yes.
It was the new economy industries, particularly internet companies in California's Silicon Valley, which fueled America's economic boom. Now they're being blamed for the slowdown. Dot-com companies have been failing faster than it takes some people to log on. Once shopping rocked in the malls of Santa Monica and Beverly Hills, this year the sales came early. Shoppers have taken fright at falling share prices and are tightening their belts.
Turn on the radio and the television and all you hear are predictions that the economy is slowing down and that things aren't going to be as prosperous in the future, so I'm just playing it cool.
Keeping America out of recession may rest with this man. Alan Greenspan was in icy Washington this morning to chair a meeting of the Federal Reserve. There'll be no cut in interest rates for now, but he warned the world's largest economy is slowing down.
The U.S. has been the engine of growth in the last 5 years, an important export destination for both European businesses and for Asian businesses. If that export marketplace dries up significantly, both Europe and Asia can expect significant slowdowns.
In the words of the famous slogan, it's the economy, stupid. Tackling it may prove to be the greatest challenge of George W. Bush's presidency. The world will be watching in the hope that he gets it right. David Willis, BBC News, California.
The singer-songwriter Kirsty MacColl has died after she was hit by a speedboat while swimming on holiday in Mexico. She had hits with her own songs in the 70s and 80s and was also famous for her versions of other people's hits. More recently, she'd been recording songs inspired by her travels in Cuba and Brazil. The makers of the world's biggest passenger aircraft today talked of a new era in flight as they unveiled the Airbus A380. The double-decked Super Jumbo will seat more than 500 people. The airliner's wings will be built in Britain, creating or safeguarding over 20,000 jobs.
Welcome aboard what the promotional video seems to suggest will be high urban chic at 35,000 feet. A plane that will revolutionise air travel, a plane that will carry over 550 passengers, and if you believe the hype, forget sitting with your knees tucked under your chin. This will offer space as never before.
About 35% more than on existing aircraft. And of course, this allows the companies to offer special amenities like bars, restaurants, libraries, why not casino.
Indeed, Virgin Atlantic talk about equipping their fleet with gyms and double beds when the plane comes into service in 6 years' time. But, say some, that's not so much luxury in the sky as pie in the sky.
Airlines will not want people moving around in an aircraft cabin. If you hit air turbulence, well, you can imagine what would happen if people are on the treadmill or sitting in a casino, which is another idea we've heard about. But also, it is economics. I think this is early PR. The airlines positioning themselves to say they're going to use it most to consumers' advantage.
But above all, this is a huge economic opportunity. Here at Filton, outside Bristol, 1,000 jobs will be created, more at Broughton in North Wales, where the wing will be made, and there'll be many more overall, taking into account suppliers.
I think the answer quite clearly is many, many jobs, 22,000 either sustained or created in the United Kingdom. So it really is good news for the UK today.
The Americans are muttering about this breaking competition rules, to which Airbus replies, yes, we do get loans from European governments, but we repay them at commercial rates. But the mere fact that the Americans are protesting is perhaps a sure sign that they're worried that this plane will actually succeed. John Sopel, BBC News, Toulouse.
Football and in tonight's Worthington Cup quarter-finals. In the match at Selhurst Park, a mistake by Sunderland's goalkeeper helped give Crystal Palace the lead through Mikael Forsell, only for Sunderland to equalise within a minute with a goal from Alex Ray. But Palace secured a 2-1 victory with a well-taken goal from Clinton Morrison. They now meet Liverpool in the semi-finals. And in tonight's other match, Ipswich beat Manchester City 2-1 after extra time. They now play Birmingham City. Well, the time's now 25 past 10. I'll be back a little later with the latest on the day's headlines, but now the news where you are.
Good evening.
A Dutchman convicted of one of the most distressing animal cruelty cases to come before a Scottish court has left the country. Johannes Hellinger was due to be sentenced at Arbroath Sheriff Court today and had already been warned he could be facing a jail sentence. The businessman achieved notoriety in the 70s for controversial land deals in the Highlands. You may find some scenes in this report upsetting.
Today, Johannes Hellinger's Arbroath mansion house was deserted. After being convicted last month, he was warned he faced a prison sentence. Such was the scale of neglect in the yard behind the house that out of 148 calves, only 9 had survived. The authorities had first been alerted by the condition of a vehicle being used to transport the calves, but subsequent visits revealed the animals had been kept in dreadful conditions and that almost all of them were dead or dying.
I've had 25 years working in environmental health. Some of the vets have more experience. None of us have ever experienced cruelty to animals on this scale at all. It's quite appalling. Carcasses were found in the garden. There were quite a number of carcasses in a locked wooden brick outbuilding. They'd been there for a few weeks. Most of them, I believe, died through malnutrition, pneumonia. There were 2 calves found on the premises whose throats had been cut.
90% of the animals were ill. Those that hadn't died had to be humanely destroyed. Mr. Hellinger maintained all along he was only the financier, buying the calves to be raised by someone else in order to pay off a debt.
And you have a bank, the Royal Bank of Scotland, and he finances farmers, yeah? Then he cannot say that the dying cows of calves, they go to the director of the Royal Bank. It's too cuckoo.
Were you not aware that the calves were in a poor state and
no.
They were directly behind your home?
No.
But this afternoon, Mr. Hellinger's lawyer told the court his client would not be appearing for sentence. He'd left a message with his secretary to say he'd left the country.
44 suspected illegal immigrants are being questioned after a joint early morning operation in Duns in Berwickshire. The men and women from Lithuania, Latvia and Belarus were on their way to work at a fish factory in Duns, but were detained by immigration service staff and officers from Northumbria Police at a caravan park in Berwick-upon-Tweed.
The news that over 40 workers at this seafood factory in Duns were being held by immigration officers on suspicion of illegally entering the country was greeted with bewilderment by management today.
When we came in this morning and learnt that the police had taken away 44 operators from the factory, we were quite astounded and have been slowly unveiling and putting together the facts.
A spokesman for the employment agency who'd recruited the detainees to work at the factory was adamant that their papers were in order. He produced documents which he claimed bore a Home Office stamp, giving the group the right to work in Britain.
When you claim political asylum, you get identification. After 6 months, you receive work permit, stamp on the back, which is allowed to work in this country. Forever till, political asylum will be refused.
So you're saying these people are here working legally?
Yeah, definitely.
This group of Eastern Europeans accounted for about 10% of the workforce at farms. Management say they simply couldn't find enough local people to fill casual vacancies, and that's why they've turned to recruitment agencies to find them workers. The group are mainly Lithuanian, Russian and Belarusian and have been taken to Newcastle for questioning after being picked up in Berwick in the early hours.
We'll ascertain the status of the people in question. If that status is an unlawful status, they'll be served with papers, and having got themselves into that position, they can then be removed from the country to the country of which they're a national as a result of the papers we serve after taking that particular decision.
Immigration authorities won't confirm when that decision will be made. The group is likely to remain in custody overnight. Sangeeta Maiska, reporting Scotland.
The wife of a man still missing after a light aircraft vanished over the Highlands a week ago has appealed for help in trying to determine what happened. Bob McLean and the pilot, Ewan Spalding, were on a business trip to the Western Isles when they vanished. Now, some of Hollywood's celebrity elite have dressed up for the winter weather and begun to jet into the Highlands in advance of Madonna and Guy Ritchie's wedding on Friday. Among them was the Oscar-winning actress Gwyneth Paltrow, thought to be the chief bridesmaid.
First to grace the apron was film actress Gwyneth Paltrow, said to be one of the bridesmaids. Stella McCartney, daughter of Paul, and wedding dress designer was with her too. And then the couple who introduced Madonna to Guy Ritchie, actress Trudy Styler and husband Sting. clearly prepared for a song or two as well. The groom's father, more modestly, emerged from a scheduled flight, delighted to be back in Scotland to see his son getting hitched.
I love the thought of it. Very exciting, very unusual, and it's going to be great fun.
And how do you feel about having Madonna as a prospective daughter-in-law?
Well, I feel very honoured for somebody as talented as that, yes.
Come on, darling.
Dornoch, meanwhile, is starting to realise just what it's about to experience as the international media circus rolls into town.
Media are obviously here to record as much of what's going on in relation to Madonna as they can, and they're looking for help from us and where to site their vehicles and where they can put their cameras and where the best vantage points will be and so on.
But while several hundred journalists, photographers and camera crews are expected to converge on Dornoch Cathedral on Thursday for baby Rocco's christening, police say the public are welcome to try to catch a glimpse as well.
The Rangers chairman, David Murray, has confirmed that the club still intends to go ahead with a stock market flotation, but only when the time is right. He was speaking at the club's annual general meeting in Glasgow, where despite recent poor results, shareholders gave the chairman and manager, Dick Advocaat, their full backing. We'll have full updates on Breakfast News tomorrow morning. Now back to Michael Burke in London.
And the main news again, Camelot's been given another 7 years to run the National Lottery. Sir Richard Branson said he was disappointed, sad and baffled and may go to court. MPs have voted overwhelmingly tonight to allow research on human embryos. Newsnight starting now over on BBC Two will be talking to Sir Richard Branson and to Diane Thompson of Camelot about the lottery decision. But from the 10 o'clock news, good night.
Good evening. Fog will continue to be a problem, I think, this week. Hill fog was the problem today, and the cloud that brought the hill fog also gave us a rather damp day at Pembrey Sands around Carmarthen Bay. But we had rain in many parts. You can see how the cloud spilled its way northwards through the day, and that weather front, which stretches right the way down to Iberia, will still be around for tomorrow. But then it gets pushed out the way for Thursday and Friday, and then we should see a good deal of dry weather until the weekend, when this cold front looks as if it'll slip its way southwards, bringing us some more seasonal weather. So although the next couple of nights should be largely frost-free, I think by the time we get through to Saturday and Sunday, we could see those frosty nights making a return. Of course, that's quite a way off yet. It's worth keeping tuned to the forecasts. And tonight should be largely frost-free, in fact quite a mild but rather windy night. And the reason that it's mild is the wind direction. We've got a southeasterly at the moment, gale force in the north, but gradually through tomorrow those winds will ease down. But fog as well as rain will be a problem through the coming night. Hill fog in particular, but even at some lower levels we could see the visibility down to 200 metres, perhaps 100 metres in places. Coupled with the rain, the heavy rain, there could be some quite hazardous driving conditions. Now you can see the extent of the rain at the moment really gathering through Northern Ireland and Scotland. Now it's going to be quite a wet night with some dribs and drabs of rain further east as well. Now they're all tied in with our weather system, and the problem we have is that it'll remain slow moving, so the same areas are going to see further rainfall tonight and tomorrow, perhaps another inch.